Mark Jenkins said, "Adventure is a path. Real adventure, self-determined, self-motivated, often risky, forces you to have firsthand encounters with the world." My guest today, Nikolai Dotter, is on his path to adventure through Operation Brazil. What is Operation Brazil, you might ask? Operation Brazil is taking his motorcycle from his stateside home in the Bay Area of California and traveling to Brazil. Get ready to hit the road with Nikolai in Mexico and Guatemala on his way to Brazil. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. My name is Jake Bushman, and I am the host of Journey with Jake, where we talk about adventure and the journey to get there. This is episode 118, and what an opportunity I had to speak with adventurer Nikolai Dotter. Before we get into my conversation with Nico, please subscribe to Journey with Jake wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you watch this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the like button over there as well. One thing that would help me is a rating and review. If you would be so kind to give me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, that would mean a lot to me. If you don't leave me a review, that's okay as well. I'm just happy that you're here. I'm excited for everyone to hear another motorcycle adventure. If you like this episode, you will also love episode number 11 with Mike Jennings, who motorcycled across China. Okay, let's get to my conversation with Nikolai. Well, I'm excited today because I have Nico on the show. Nico, welcome to Journey with Jake.
Hey, Jake. Really excited to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fun for me. You're someone who's super adventurous. That's what I like. I like to hear people who have adventures. We're going to talk about Operation Brazil, which is what you're currently kind of going through right now as you try to work your way from the Bay Area down to South America into Brazil. And not just make your way, but you're making your way on a motorcycle. So it's going to be awesome to hear about that. Before we jump into all that good stuff, I'd like to know a little bit about who you are and where you're from and all that good stuff. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about who Nico is.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm from Oakland, California. My mother is Norwegian, so I've got a bit of Norwegian in me. I've always been an adventurous type ever since I was a kid, and that comes from my parents and the school I went to, as well as just how I was born, I guess. Always been pushing the limit. But yeah, I think I've done a lot, especially in my 20s, from traveling across Europe to across Asia to survivalist camping in Hawaii. And now I'm taking a motorcycle from California all the way to Brazil, as you mentioned.
Wow. Okay. So a couple things you said there. You said you get a lot of your adventurous spirit kind of from your parents. Your mom's Norwegian. What is it about your parent? What is it that they instilled in you to be adventurous?
Yeah. So especially my father, actually. So I grew up with him just always talking about his adventures and his travels. So he did quite a bit when he was young, and he was always so excited about it and wanted to share those stories. He's quite the storyteller. It's probably someone you should have on the show. But yeah, that really was a big part of my upbringing. And then on top of that, they sent me to this school in the Redwood Forest here in the Bay Area, and it was very focused on being creative and adventurous. And we'd go on mushroom hunts and go on lots of hiking and camping trips as a school. It's very different and unique, kind of like a Waldorf program a little bit, but it was different. And that's, credited to my parents as well for sending me there. And yeah.
Can we dive into the school thing a little bit more? Because when you said that earlier, you're like, and school was a big part of it. I'm thinking like you hang out with your buddies and you guys would like do flips on the playground. But now you talk about this school that you went to. Was it like a boarding school? Like, was it you get sent away to it, or was it like what?
No,
Yeah, kind of
it's
explain a little
actually,
bit.
yeah, sure. It's a really unique place. It's called Canyon School, and it's in between kind of the Oakland Hills and a place called Moraga. It has a really long history. It's a little canyon, as the name suggests. It's in the redwoods, and it goes back to when there used to be a railroad that would go through there, and it turned into kind of like a hippie community. So growing up, all the houses in Canyon didn't um, really exist on paper, or at least a lot of them. It was kind of this like interesting little area near Berkeley, California, with a major hippie past. Yeah, they focus a lot on just being creative and adventuring and seeing the world differently. And they gave a lot of opportunity in that sense. Like on every Wednesday, we would do capoeira and have art class and then music class, and then we would go out in the woods, right? And not many schools give you that opportunity. And I
No
think
way.
that kind of led to me being a little different as a person and having some different aspirations.
Very cool. Okay, I love that. The other thing too, I think about you that I've noticed, well, just because I do my little research and try to look you up a little bit. Looks like you're involved in corporate life. I mean, it sounds like you were working corporate gigs, that sort of thing. Kind of what was the background on that?
Yeah, so I also always grew up being really interested in being entrepreneurial. So I would like collect sour grass and try and sell it to other kids at school, or trade Pokemon cards for money and things like that. So I was always very interested in the business aspect of things. And then, I was kind of a rascal throughout high school, or whatever you want to call it. But eventually I decided I need to go do something and make money and go to university. And of course, I decided on entrepreneurship and business. And then in the real world, that kind of landed me in the realm of marketing. So yeah, I did work in corporate life for 5 years before this latest trip, Operation Brazil, which is kind of a sabbatical to be determined if I ever return to corporate life.
Interesting. Very good. So are you kind of using Operation Brazil as kind of a gauge, I guess, to see kind of where you want to go?
Yeah, to be honest, working in San Francisco in the tech world and doing corporate life, it's very cutthroat. It was, you don't have much time to focus on your hobbies and interests. And of course, I'm someone that really loves to be outdoors, to be pushing my limits and doing really, having a more exciting lifestyle. So I kind of burnt out. So by the time I went on this trip, I knew I needed it and I wanted to do something big. And I have to decide on this trip if I want to go back to a corporate existence or not. And on top of that, during this time, I started some side businesses. Most importantly, I've got like a little e-commerce business, and that's helping sustain myself. So I'm kind of trying to grow those up and see if that could sustain my whole lifestyle, and if I don't need to go back to corporate life. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Hey, well, and I love it. I think you have a dream. I think that's good. You have that goal that maybe you don't want to go back, and hopefully you can find some of these other things that'll help sustain you to be able to do the things that you love. I mean,
Right.
I think that's what everyone wants to do. I mean, I would love to be podcasting full time, 100% all the time that's my goal. That's my dream to do that.
Right.
Maybe that'll happen one day. We'll see. So yeah, I think that's great they have that. Okay. A little bit about your family again, before we jump into some of your adventures.
Hmm.
Parents, do you have any siblings, anything like that?
Yeah, so I have a sister and yeah, just my parents. So a small family. I've got extended family in Seattle and then also in Norway.
Very good. Okay. So because you got that Norwegian background, I'm sure you've been to Norway probably then, right? Have you been to Norway? Maybe you haven't.
Yeah, that's probably part of what drove my adventurousness as well, is that we would go back almost every summer because we had to spend time with the family. Right? So yeah, I've been to Norway many times. I can mainly speak Norwegian. I'm conversational, and I'm a dual citizen. And then usually when we'd go back for the summer, we would visit somewhere else. So I definitely got the opportunity to see a lot and travel when I was younger doing that.
Wow. Okay. Very good. Glad you had that experience. That sounds awesome. Plus, you get to know your roots a little bit and where you're from and that kind of thing. All right. So you mentioned something when you were talking about all these cool places you've been, and you've been to Asia and to Europe, and you've done things. You said in Hawaii you did like survivalist camp or something, is what you said. What is that all about?
So that actually started in when I would go to Norway. And by the way, that was like a deal my mom had with my father. She's like, if I'm going to move to the US, we have to go back for at least the summer. Like, we have to. But when I would go back to Norway, I didn't always have, the same group of friends and like a big support system as much there. So I would spend a decent amount like just exploring in the woods and using my imagination. And I started getting into the idea of trying to like live off the land and do survivalist stuff. So I started doing that when I was around 16 or something like that. I would just like go out and find a spot and camp and try and forage and fish and whatnot, and that kind of developed over time. And then now I've done multiple like 2 week like semi survivalist trip where I bring like very minimal gear and minimal supplies and just try and you know live as much as I can off the land. So yeah, I did that quite a bit during the pandemic. My favorite place nowadays to do it is a place called Waimanu Valley on the Big Island of Hawaii. It's like a 21-mile round trip hike out to the beach. And this place is just incredible. You've got pretty much unlimited coconuts. You can catch shrimp super easily in the river, as well as some small fish. There's guavas everywhere. There's a mango forest. There's giant breadfruit that you can just roast on the fire, and it kind of tastes like a combination of potato and artichoke. And you can just live very comfortably, like off the land on this gorgeous beach. And oftentimes there's no one there. So I'll go out there for like
Wow.
10 days, 2 weeks.
Really? Okay. I was going to ask how long you could just be out there, how long you've been out there living. So like upwards of 2 weeks, you're just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, but every time I do it, I'm like, I could do this for much longer. You could hang out there for quite a while. Yeah.
Just living off the land.
Yeah.
All right. What are you doing? What are you doing for shelter? Because I know it rains in Hawaii. I mean, what are you doing for that?
I'll bring tarps. I'll bring tarps and a
Okay.
hammock. So I'll set up tarps in a hammock situation. So I'm not, this is semi-survival. Like I'm bringing gear just minimal,
Yeah.
I haven't gone full, like, cutting down like branches and creating a shelter here, but I have done that in here in California. Um,
Okay.
yeah, where I've created like a fort and lived in the fort.
Yeah.
And yeah. Someday I want to do something like Survivor.
Yeah.
That would be an amazing experience, I think.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd love to see you on something like that. That'd be a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, alone.
Wow.
I'm not alone level, but I'd love to go on something,
Yeah. Yeah. That alone, I've seen a few episodes of that. Those guys
intense.
are guys are intense. Yeah.
That's really intense.
Very intense. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, very good. We're going to jump a little bit into your Operation Brazil and what you got going on there. Kind of give me the background on how kind of this came about, how you decided, hey, I want to take my motorcycle or a motorcycle and trek all the way from California, the Bay Area, all the way down to Brazil, Mexico, Central America, South America. How did this come about?
Right. So when I graduated college, I saved up for a year, and then I traveled in Asia, and I ended up learning how to ride a motorcycle in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City, which was a crazy experience. But that was like the highlight of my trip was motorcycling across Vietnam and meeting other cyclists along the way, and just all the little adventures you have when you're going off these small roads and just coming across areas that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten to explore when you're traveling by land, and with the freedom of having the motorcycle. So after that experience, I kind of decided I want to do something bigger. I want to do a year-long trip somewhere. And of course, going through Central and South America seems to be kind of the standard for that, and a good place to start. It's already on my route. I lived in San Francisco at the time, and decided that would just be perfect to get something like a 650 and just make my way down to Argentina and across Brazil. I've also always wanted to learn Spanish, and I'm approaching 30. So I kind of decided this is the time to do it while I'm still at the age where hostels are appealing, and yeah, I just decided to go for it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you made that decision to go for it.
Yeah.
Do it before you
Yeah.
turn 30, kind of get that out.
Mm-hmm. I use that as kind of a, now that I'm getting really close, I'm 29 and a half. I have no like fear about turning 30 anymore, but I had that fear for a long time. And it was just kind of I need to do this and this and this and this before I turn 30. Right. So that kind of got it in my head. I have to go on this trip. So I was turning 29 and it was like, this is the time I'm going to leave my job. I'm spending 29 traveling around the world on a motorcycle and staying at hostels and getting that nice combination of adventure and party and culture and everything, right? So I pulled the trigger, and most of my friends and family didn't believe I would actually do it, but I did it, and now I'm in the middle of it.
That's what's interesting too. You are kind of in the middle of it right now. I know you're taking a little hiatus from the operation, but it's happening right now. You're kind of in the middle of it. So we're going to kind of mostly talk about kind of the first half, because that's what you've been going through. You
Right.
said something though that I thought was interesting. You had that kind of fear of getting older, like of oh shoot,
Yes.
turn 30, I got to get this stuff done. But you said you don't feel quite the same anymore. Like you overcame that. Was it something with starting this? Did that help you overcome that, or what is it that made you think, hey, it's okay to get a little older now? What kind of happened to you, do you think?
Well, I think I've always kind of had this. Even when I was in my teens, I was worried about, I've always had this idea that, the clock is ticking. There's only so much time, and there's so much things I want to do. And there's certain things I want to do while I'm at a certain age or age range, right? Like I want to experience Asia and South America and Europe's hostel scenes where I'm still at an age where I'm interested in doing the hostel scenes, right? And then there's other things I'm going to want to do in my 30s and 40s. So I want to live a life full of adventure and have interesting stories and look back on all these experiences. And then with 5 years of working in the corporate world, I was kind of feeling like that time is just kind of sucking away. Spending so much time in the office looking at a computer, running analytics, I was feeling a little bit tense of what am I doing with this time? I need to go. So finally got to that last year, and I went for it.
Awesome. You mentioned the word adventure, and this is an adventure podcast. And you said you want to go on adventures, you want to do adventurous things. For you personally, then, what does adventure mean to you?
I think adventure means going out of your comfort zone, going to places where you've never been before, or where others say are, maybe dangerous, or it doesn't have to be places, but doing things that push the boundary of what's comfortable for you and for what you think that'll bring you outside of what you think. Like I had all these feelings about Mexico and about Central America, and I've proven almost all of them wrong, and I have a completely different understanding, and I wouldn't have had that if I didn't go on this adventure. And it really is going into the unknown, and it's hard in the time we live in to truly go into unknown because we have all this access to information. But you find out very quickly that it's not true. You have all this access to information, and a lot of that information isn't true, or the ideas you have in your head that you think you understand a place or what it's like to do something, and you really don't. So just going out of your comfort zone, doing something that is potentially dangerous, or could potentially open your mind, or could push your limits or be uncomfortable, that's adventure for me.
I love that. And I love how you talked about perception and how, we kind of have perceptions of what we think things will be like. I'm lucky I get to do this podcast. I get to talk to some amazing people like yourself who've done some amazing things. And one of those things is their perceptions seem to change as they adventure and do things. I talked to a couple that was taking a van across Mexico, and
Yeah.
It wasn't like, you think of Mexico, you think, oh, it's dangerous and it's scary and, you shouldn't be doing it. And the places are, but it's not quite like that. So let's jump into some of your adventures, if you don't mind. Obviously you had to get through California first and get down to the border, but let's dive in wherever you kind of, what you want us to hear as far as starting off, getting into Mexico and kind of some of your experiences that you've had.
Well, going off that note of how I want the full adventure experience where I don't really know what's going to happen, and I want to just experience something for myself. I didn't do as much research as I should have when I entered Mexico. You know, I've crossed a couple borders, but I've never crossed a border by land on in my own vehicle before, let alone by motorcycle. So when I crossed, I was expecting to be stopped and like, here's my passport. You know, I didn't really know exactly what to expect. They just like waved me through, right? Gave the just the very simple like wave through, and then I was rushing because I was meeting someone all the way in Cabo, so I didn't really think about it. I just kept driving. I just kept going, and the idea in my head, and I had heard something about this, that when you cross with the ferry out of Baja California to mainland Mexico, that's where you deal with, getting your permit for your motorcycle and stuff like that. So in my head, I was like,
Gotcha.
okay, they didn't care, so I just continued on. Got to Cabo, and then I was told you're going to have to go back because you didn't get your temporary import permit, and you cannot do that here. You have to go all the way back to the border. So I actually went
To
all
the
the way down
border.
to California and back, and then back again.
Wow.
Which,
Okay.
yeah,
So you're in the Baja part. You crossed like what, Tijuana area, San
crossing
Diego, kind of.
Tijuana. Mm,
Okay, so cross Tijuana, which is on the Baja part. We went all the way down to Cabo.
yeah,
We got there and realized, shoot, had to turn, go all the way back, and then you went
yeah,
back down again.
yes.
Wow. Okay. How much driving was this for you?
It was a lot of driving. I raced to Cabo because I was behind schedule. So that was pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I got to Cabo in 3 days. But going back, I took it a little slower. I did a lot of off roading and camping and seeing more things. So I think all in all, I went up and down for about 2 weeks. So it could have been like 5 days in Baja, but it was 2 weeks instead because of that mistake.
And there it is, your first experience on your motorcycle in Mexico. Yeah,
Yeah.
going all the way on the Baja. You saw a lot of the Baja, I'm guessing.
I saw a lot of Baja, and you know what? Baja is not my favorite. It's got a lot of beauty, but it's also just so much desert and old American tourists. Just it's not. It doesn't feel like the real authentic Mexico I was dreaming of.
Mm-hmm.
But it has a lot to offer, especially on like motorsports and whatnot. But I loved Mexico. I love Mexico so much more after I crossed over. Um, it's much more interesting.
Let's talk. Yeah, and crossing over, you said you took a ferry, right? You took a ferry from somewhere down there, I guess, across to, I don't know. I'm not sure where it is. What are the locations that you crossed?
So you typically cross to Mazatlan, but
Okay.
I was sold out when I got there to go to Mazatlan, so I had to go further north to Topolobampo in Sinaloa, further north in Sinaloa, and this is somewhere that is a travel advisory, like don't go. And I've heard that Sinaloa is a very dangerous place, but I didn't have a choice unless I wanted to wait for another 2 weeks in Baja. So I ended up taking the ferry to northern Sinaloa and Topo. I was extremely nervous. I had all these ideas in my head as an American of like, it's going to be all this violence and danger. And I even had a friend of mine that's, she's like a Mexican American, and she told me like, don't go north of Mazatlan. It's extremely dangerous. You're risking your life, you know. And then I went to this place in Topolobampo, and it's gorgeous. It's like a vacation town for Mexicans. It felt completely safe, and it was an awesome experience. I had no problem whatsoever throughout 90% of my time in Mexico. That was the story. It was just kind, welcoming people. Never felt in too much danger. You follow simple rules like, you don't go to some specific areas, and you don't like travel around on your bike with your stuff at night, right? And it felt very safe 90% of the time. So coming from Oakland, California, I would say that it felt safer in Mexico, which is kind of very different than what I expected. Yeah. And I went everywhere in
Wow.
Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see there. Yeah, and there's your perceptions. Like you said, you're in your mind, and I don't know. I mean, what if we, like me, someone like me who's, I've watched Narcos, things like that, where you think, there's cartels and it's going to be crazy and things. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there but anywhere you go,
They're
there's,
there.
things
Yeah,
like
right.
that. But yeah, they're there for sure. But you just being smart about it. It sounds like too. It sounds like you were smart about, going to certain
Well,
spots,
also
things like that. You just,
the people look out for you. They'll tell, like, your best resource when traveling through Mexico is the people. If you talk to someone local, they'll tell you if a place is safe or not, and they're not going to be messing with you. They're telling you the truth. And if you're in an area that's unsafe, you'll have like 3 or 4 people tell you like, "Hey, you should go back this way, or don't come here," or something. Like, people have got your back. And then on top of that, from talking to a lot of locals, the cartels want nothing to do with tourists. There's like a very much a no, don't mess with tourist policy across most of Mexico. So it happens, but it's very, very rare. Yeah, a lot
I'll
of the
edit this
places
in.
that are actually have a major cartel presence are actually some of the safest to go as a tourist, which is very counter to what you believe. But they kind of make sure there's no crime in the area. Like, if I've gone to a beach town called Huatulco or something like that, and there's a major presence, but they basically make it so if anyone commits a crime in that area, they have to deal with the cartel, which is a lot scarier than the police, right? So
Yeah,
they
for
kind
sure.
of actually, it feels kind of like a utopia while you're there, as long as you're not causing problems. It's very comfortable. So it's a lot different than what I expected. And then I'm focusing so much on the cartel and the crime because that's something that a lot of Americans, perceive about
It's the
Mexico, and
perception.
you
Yeah.
just don't feel it very much. It feels pretty comfortable, and you get used when you spend a lot of time there, and you just get used to, you know, living your daily life, and you feel comfortable talking to any random person you meet, and it's good, and everyone's so incredibly friendly there. Like, the friendliest, I would say. I've been to something like 26 countries, and I would say Mexicans are like top 3 friendliest, probably,
Nice.
that I've
Wow.
experienced. Yeah.
Great.
It was awesome. Yeah, it was really great.
So tell me this, what is kind of your plan as you're going through? Do you have a certain place you're trying to get to? I know like the first time you had to get down to Cabo to meet somebody or whatever. Do you kind of have plans like that? Or are you just kind of taking things as they come? Are you staying at hostels? You camping? What's kind of just the
Mhm.
flow of it for you? I mean, what kind of, how did you have it set up, I guess?
So actually, I really don't like to have a plan. So that was very different, that I had someone I was meeting. I've done that maybe twice in my trip so far. But yeah, typically I'll just go until I find like a hotel or a hostel or something. Or if I have a specific town I'm aiming for, I'll go there, but I won't have a plan on how long I'm going to stay there. I'll just feel it out. And when I'm traveling from one place to another, I don't have like a specific hotel I'm going to or a specific place I'm going to. I'll just like drive until I find something, which has gotten me in trouble quite a few times, where I have to like
I was gonna
stay at a
say,
really shitty hotel or camp on the side of the road or
okay, yeah,
something like that.
I was hoping you'd elaborate on that a little bit. Like what's kind of what things have happened because you haven't,
Yeah. Well, I've definitely been in a position where it's gotten dark and I'm continuing to ride, and there's nothing coming up. There's no hotel and there's no apparent place to camp because I just carry a hammock. I'm not carrying a tent. So I have to find somewhere I can hang it. So I'll just like be driving and driving and driving, waiting for, something to pop up, and nothing pops up, and then you end up just like on the ground sleeping, you know.
the side of the road.
Well, I usually try to get off the road to where I'm not visible. That's
Uh-huh.
important, right? But yeah, pretty much just sleeping on the side of the road somewhere.
Wow.
Or, it's gotten dark and I reach a hotel, but I've been driving freezing cold for like 2 hours before I got that, and it just adds to the adventure. It's more exciting to go that way, right?
Well, I like it. I like not having a plan. I think that there's something to be said for that. I'm a planner. It's kind of by nature. I like to plan things. But
Yeah,
I've had those moments where I haven't had to plan, and man, it's such a relief sometimes not to be
right.
have these plans to just kind of go with the flow. So tell me this: have you had it in your travels through Mexico? We'll kind of just focus on Mexico right now. Have you got to a place or a city that you've been like, you know what, I love this place. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to explore. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to relax. And any Yeah, any experiences with that? Any particular place in Mexico?
Multiple times. That was my whole experience really in Mexico. I intended on being in Mexico for maybe 2 months. Like I didn't plan it, but I was thinking probably 2 months or something. I was there for 5. So there was Guanajuato was gorgeous. I stayed longer than I expected. Guadalajara was incredible. I ended up going to Mexico City twice. And then I really fell in love with Oaxaca and Puerto Escondido. And by the time I made it to Puerto Escondido, I was a little exhausted from traveling. And I had run into a little bit of trouble. So it was kind of nice to just be somewhere that felt beautiful and safe and surrounded by really interesting people, both from Mexico and from abroad, and to just surf and buy my own groceries and kind of live. So I actually stayed in Puerto Escondido for 2 months.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I
Wow.
really liked it there. It was very difficult to get myself to move on. Um, but yeah, multiple
What were
times.
where were you living when you were living in Puerto Escondido?
And so I was bouncing around, but mainly hostels. And then I had an Airbnb for like 2 weeks.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, I was staying mainly at this hostel called Selena. And that I've got a bunch of little hacky travel things I do. And one of them is that I use travel credit cards, like a Chase Sapphire, for example.
Hmm.
And then they have a point system. So if I do all my spending on there, and then I find hostels that take points, and hostels are so cheap that the points basically covers my entire stay. So I stayed for
Nice.
without paying $1 at Selena. Uh,
Wow. Good for you.
yeah,
Got to
and
have
then
those
I run
travel
my
hacks.
run my little e-commerce business, right? So I do advertising, and the advertising dollars go through a Chase Inc. card that generates points for travel, and does it basically pays for staying in a lot of places. So
Cool.
that's one of my
That's
main
a good
trips.
way to do it. Yeah. Because I was wondering. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's cheap to just drop everything, drop your job, and go on. But you got your little side hustles that you're doing, and you got
Right.
smart little hacks that you're doing. You mentioned before you got to Puerto Escondido, you were starting to get into a little bit of trouble. What kind of trouble was that?
So in Oaxaca, I did get drugged and robbed. Um,
Oh, okay.
so that was the one time that something happened in Mexico after my whole spiel of how safe it is. But that would happen anywhere, right? That could happen that could happen in Europe or in any
Hmm.
major city in the U.S. So I don't. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I was not being cautious that night. Um, I had won a beer pong tournament at a hostel, and I was excited about it. American winning beer pong, and then yeah, so I bought some people some drinks, and I was kind of leaving my drink like on the table and just not paying attention and just having a good time, and suddenly I went from like tipsy to drunk to like completely gone very very rapidly, like just disappeared. Don't remember anything for like 3 hours. And I came to, and my friends were taking me back to the hostel, and my phone and wallet were gone. Yeah, and then I had like a
Wow.
4 day hangover after, which was an indicator that it was
More than just,
more than just
yeah.
alcohol. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that sucked. That was a major low point. But it happened. I didn't have my phone for quite a while after that. And that was actually a major adventure in itself. And I really enjoyed that time because I spent so much more time reading. And when I was driving the motorcycle places, I had to like ask for directions and I had to like talk to people more. And it just felt like kind of like old school adventuring, right? Like I would like go into my journal and I would like draw a map of where I'm going and the street names. And that's how I would like get from point A to point B. And I actually really enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. And then instead of like when you go to a cool place, instead of taking photos, you have to really just focus and try and ingrain it in your mind. It was kind of nice not having my phone for a while. So actually,
I
it was
think
fun.
that's kind of the big dilemma that we all kind of struggle with and face, because it's nice, yeah, GPS, directions. So there's a lot of conveniences, but that also it's a big distraction in a lot of ways. And when you're going out seeing these places without having to worry about, oh, I got to pull out the phone and take a selfie or a picture or whatever, There's something to be said for that, I think. That's pretty cool that you got to experience that. It wasn't the way you wanted to experience it. You were kind of forced into it, but I think it was probably a good lesson for you.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the best experiences you're not anticipating, and that's the whole adventure aspect, right? You never know when something's going to completely change, and what's important is that you have the right mentality about it and you keep pushing forward, and maybe it turns out to be a blessing in disguise like this was. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, so you get through Mexico, and then I guess you're heading into Central America. Kind of, and where are you at now on the journey? Because I think you're Guatemala, maybe a little further, El Salvador. I'm not sure where you are.
yeah, so I'm ready to move on into El Salvador. The number one reason I came back was I needed to renew my registration on my motorcycle as well as my passport. So I decided to go get those things done instead of waiting to have them shipped to Guatemala, and just to come back and see friends and family. And then I had some other things happen. My phone camera broke, and my computer completely broke. So, and I need the computer for my little side hustle.
Yeah.
So I decided better come home, just deal with that stuff quickly, see everybody, get that all out of the way, and then I'll go into El Salvador when I get back. So that will be next up. I'm posting everything on Instagram, right? Nikolai, Neeekolai, terrible username. It's an inside joke with my friends that I grew up with, because my Norwegian mom would always yell Nikolai, right? So it's kind of phonetically how she pronounces my name.
So that's okay. Let's tell that again. That Instagram we got Neekol.
Neee, so 3 E's.
3 E's. Okay. Neeek.
Aola, and then I, another 3 I's.
Okay. So the Nikolai. So if we get the E's and the I's, then we're good. All right. Perfect. So people can kind of follow along with your journey there. What are your impressions of Central America so far?
I think it's awesome. I love how, one of the most interesting things about Central America so far, both in Guatemala and in Mexico, has been that even people with so little seem so happy, and they're so open and welcoming and happy, and have, seem to have great lives. They're always dancing and singing and making jokes, and just seem to have really high spirits, right? And even in like little villages, and you don't see quite that as much. Like it feels that we have such a focus in the US on being successful and capital, right? And it's nice, and it gives you a very different perspective to see that you don't need to have a lot of things or a lot of money to be happy. And some of the people with the least are much happier than a lot of people that have a lot on paper. So I think that's been kind of the greatest experience I've gotten out of my time in Central America so far.
I love it. I love hearing that.
Yeah. And then the food is so good, and the parties are great. And there's so much beauty too in the natural environment, especially in Guatemala. Like, it is just so different than I hadn't done really any research on what Guatemala looks like, but it is a gorgeous country. It's massive volcanoes and gorgeous lakes, and it's so lush. It's an incredible place. And Mexico has so much to offer too. Like, some of these colonial towns are just stunning. It's really, really stunning. Like Guanajuato, especially, and San Miguel in that area is just incredible. And then you get some nature too that's really blown my mind. Like, so that's some canyons that I've boated through, and I've seen some incredible waterfalls and some natural hot springs and incredible mountain ranges. And it's a beautiful, beautiful country. It's so much more than what I had in my head, I guess, from the media I've consumed and my idea of what Mexico is, right? Though it's so fun being surprised all the time and experiencing so much more than I anticipated.
I love it. So you've been going at this for what, 5 or 6 months now then? What's it been, about 6 months?
Been about 6 months.
Okay, been about 6 months.
Yeah.
You're going to
5
head
months
back
in Mexico, 1 month.
Okay, 5 months Mexico, 1 month Guatemala. You're going to head back, finish Central America, head down into South America. And I know you don't have a plan necessarily. You're kind of just winging it, so to speak. when, like, what are you kind of
Yeah.
thinking? If you're looking ahead, do you think, okay, when will I get to Brazil? Or what's kind of, if you're gauging it, any thoughts on that?
I have no idea. I have no idea. It depends. Anything can happen, right? I do think I'll travel through some of the countries a lot quicker. Mexico, I spent a lot of time because I was just so surprised and I loved it so much. Guatemala, it's going to be probably a total of one more week, or two, so let's say 6 weeks. I think El Salvador, I'm anticipating just 3 or something like that. Nicaragua, maybe a month and a half. I think Costa Rica, I'll do fairly quickly because it's very expensive and similar to a lot of the other places, and I've been there before actually. And then Panama, I don't anticipate spending too much time. I'll probably get stuck in Colombia for a while. That could be another like 3-4 monther. We'll see. And then who knows? It's really hard to say. It's gonna be a long time. Luckily, my side business helps sustain me. So I'm not too pressed financially. That's important. And then there's a matter of if I decide I want to take some part-time job or something, and that could really slow down but also extend the adventure. So there's so much opportunity and so much is unknown. I have no idea.
So as I listen to this and I hear you talk, it's slow travel, which I think is awesome. I've heard that people talk about slow travel. I think that's kind of what you're doing because you're taking the time to enjoy it and see it. You will definitely be well into your 30s by the time you're all done with this. You said you're 29 and a half now, so you'll be over 30 by the time you're done with this. What do you think the future holds? You're going to check this out. You're going to do this slow travel. You're going to get through to Brazil. Moving forward from that, I know we kind of talked about at the beginning that maybe you're kind of using this to gauge where it's going to take you or what you want it to do for you.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking now that you've done it for 6 months? Kind of where's your thoughts at, and what do you kind of want to do moving forward into the future?
Yeah, so I don't know if I will return to the US. I'm kind of thinking that those days might be past me, at least for quite a while. I've met a lot of really cool Europeans and Australians on my travels, and that's kind of making me want to go to one of those areas. And then also just the idea of working remotely or expanding my e-commerce businesses and staying Central or South America, or even returning to Asia after this is a possibility. But I think I've kind of decided I don't want to go back and work a 9 to 5 in San Francisco. So we're going to find something else to do.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts on that?
I've met a lot of people doing the digital nomad life, and I think that's something I would be interested in trying out, right? And then kind of continuing my adventures. And then if I have that income, I can just ship my motorcycle to the next part of the world and continue, So there's possibility for having an endless adventure, which would be pretty great, right? So we'll see.
Love it. So if there's someone out there who's thinking about, hey, and it doesn't have to be motorcycling from, California to Brazil, but they want to maybe do something. They're like, hey, I want to maybe try to do some sort of adventure. What kind of a word of advice do you have for someone who's kind of on the verge of maybe doing something?
I would say that there's always going to be a million reasons to not go. And what matters is just going. And you don't even have to plan that much. Just go. Just do it. If you don't have that much money saved, that's fine. Just do it anyway. Just live cheaply. It's not that hard, especially when you leave, the US or wherever you're at. Like if you go to Vietnam, it's insanely cheap. You can stay at a hostel for $5 a night. You can, get your, I mean, this was in 2018, but back then at least it was like 50 cents to $1 for a beer, and it was 50 cents to $1 for a sandwich. Like you don't have to have a lot of money to go adventure. So I wouldn't use that as a reason. There's also a lot of really great books. I'd say Vagabonding by, I want to say Rolf Potts is a really, really good book for anybody that's looking into getting into adventuring. And feel free to start small. You don't have to, as you said, you don't have to get a motorcycle and do something that's going to take forever and is potentially dangerous and take all your money. Start with a little adventure, but also don't wait on others. Like if you're gonna wait on your friends to go with you or your family to go with you, it might never happen. It's really, really, really hard. Even for me, where I surround myself with some more adventurous people, just getting your timelines lined up, and it's so hard to bring someone with you. Just go on your own, go on a little adventure, and start from there and see where it goes. You might get the bug like I did, and then there's lots more to come after that.
You got the bug. You're continuing to go on your Operation Brazil, which I think is a cool way to phrase it and say it. Nico, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it was great talking with you.
Thank you so much to Nico for coming on the show and sharing his passion for adventure and his journey on Operation Brazil. Be sure and give Nico a follow on Instagram. It's at Nikolai, and that's NEEEKOLAII. Follow his adventures there on Instagram. Speaking of Instagram, check out my account at Journey with Jake Podcast and give me a follow. Check out some clips from the show and get to know me a little bit better personally as well. Thanks to each and every one of you for listening to the show. This is my passion, and I hope that comes through in each episode. I want to hear from you. Please reach out and say hi. You can email me, jake@journeywithjake.net, or DM me on Instagram. Let me know what your favorite episode is. Let me know some adventures you would like to see featured on the show, or if you know anybody I should reach out to about being on Journey with Jake, please let me know. Next week on the show is Matt O'Neill. Matt is the host of the Good Mood Revolution podcast, and you guessed it, we're going to talk about some of Matt's adventures in having a good mood, and I'm getting a smile on my face just thinking about it. Be sure and tune in next week. Just remember, it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.